following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Big Yak. It is I, Nico Salambeni, and alongside me is me today, all alone for what is the last episode inside of Emerge's first building, the inaugural Emerge headquarters. As we have kind of hinted in prior months and have been talking about in the episodes leading up, Emerge is moving. Not very far away, just a 5-minute drive to where we are now, but what's coming with that is a lot of space. We're going to be changing up the set a little bit, going back and forth with Maranto and getting everything lined up to have the perfect creative space for what is needed for the show. And I really kind of am able to have a complete design for myself, a whole set to myself, which is exciting, awesome. And yeah, we're ready for it. It's super exciting. There's a lot of moving back and forth right now, driving between places, moving things in and out. So feels good. Feels bittersweet to be here. It's been almost 2 years since the show started, and it's all been here. Just starting from the OG room upstairs to coming down into the bunker. That was like 2 steps of evolution for the show, and it's awesome to kind of see it come together here. So, like I already said, we'll be talking about a new set, and you'll see some new ideas come up, and I'll be talking about that as we move into the next steps for the show and then for our space as a whole. And then, Big Yak will still be back after the draft. We'll be kind of discussing more things, adding more interviews, and maybe adding in some non-live content too. Making more of a YouTube-centric thing as like a whole YouTube channel and video production as a whole, as opposed to just live shows. The podcast is fun, but on days like today where, I had to have an episode out, but ideally if I don't have a guest, I don't know, no one wants to listen to me talk for 30 minutes. I don't know. So it'll become a new spot for us to put together different videos, content, beyond just a weekly talk show. So without further ado, let's get into it with everything we've been talking about with the draft. So let's start with all the buzz, and we're going to go from the top teams and move our way down. So starting with number 1 at Caleb Williams, he is a lock at number 1, or essentially a lock. There's always that never say never, but come on, let's be real. Caleb Williams is going to be a Bear as of Thursday, April 25th, 8 p.m. We can kind of just book it. I'm sure, when the team's captains go and have dinner with Caleb Williams as opposed to the team, they know what's happening. This is going to be an easy draft. So essentially the draft starts when the Washington Commanders are on the clock. So let's lead into that. Buzz has shifted from Drake May at 2 to Jaden Daniels at 2. A lot of the offseason saw Drake May mocked to Washington at number 2. Especially when there were reports earlier this week of Jaden Daniels kind of his camp having discontent with Washington. Reports came out, for those that don't know. Apparently, Jaden Daniels was supposed to meet with the Commanders in a one-on-one meeting, or that's how Daniels camp puts it. They were told that it would be a one-on-one meeting, but then when he got there, he was kind of blindsided with finding out that himself, Drake May, Michael Penix, and J.J. McCarthy were all there. Long story short, things are now smoothed over, quote-unquote, but reports and buzz and rumors throughout the league, all of the major headlines report that Jaden Daniels at 2 becomes much more of a possibility and much more of a likelihood. I think that's a good move ultimately for Washington. That, I think, from a player perspective, his player profile and how he performs, I think that's a little bit better than Drake May for Washington. The play style they're looking for in a Cliff Kingsbury offense, I think that's what's most important. Moving on to number 3 in the New England Patriots. Reports out of their camp show that they're open to moving, but the price has to be right or honestly much higher in their favor to move out of number 3. There were some early reports that showed that New England has gotten like laughable offers, and there will be uncertainty with who will be available for them at 3, with Washington unsure of Daniels or Drake May, but all their options are on the table. We all think, and we're all expecting right now, that quarterback will be at play for New England. So, I mean, what does it come down to? Is it going to be Jaden Daniels? Is it going to be Drake May? Is it going to be J.J. McCarthy? Here's the thing. I mean, if J.J. McCarthy is their move at 3, they can move down a few picks and still amass those picks, get that thing to rebuild their roster. But I ultimately think that it will end up being Drake May at 3. Arizona Cardinals are open to moving back. So the Cardinals are open to taking Marvin Harrison at number 4, moving back a few spots to grab Neighbors or Washington's Romeo Odunze. I guess reports have come out that there are 2 standing offers right now for trade back. And the trading team that's targeting that 4th overall pick will likely go after J.J. McCarthy. So there are a lot of reports coming right now that Arizona loves Marvin Harrison, and this is almost just a perfect match for them. They have a heavy need at receiver, and at the end of the day, why even try to risk it? Why try to move down? You have probably what's the best wide receiver talent in however many years sitting for you at 4. Don't overthink it. I know a lot of Draft Buzz right now has Malik Neighbors right up in that category, if not better than Harrison, but we see this every year with quarterbacks. We see it with wide receivers. Just take your guy at 4 and be happy. I mean, they have another first-round pick later on that they can use to attack the defensive side of the ball, but ultimately, take your guy at 4. Now, at number 6, we're going to skip over the Chargers. A lot of people suspect the Chargers will either trade back or go after offensive tackle Joe Alt. But the more appealing spot for me is the Giants. This is where it gets kind of interesting because they could move anywhere in this first round. I've seen mocks where they move all the way back to 28 with the Bills. I've seen mocks where they move back just a few picks. I've seen mocks where they move up to 3 to grab Drake May or grab a quarterback. Ultimately, I think it depends on if Arizona moves back. I don't know. This is a really interesting spot for me. Looking over at the notes, Joe Shine has not ruled out trading up for a quarterback or trading down to fill more holes. And Shine has said that the Giants are not one player away from contending. So, all that being said, it's going to probably be quarterback. It looks like the Giants are going to rebuild this year. Moving on to Atlanta, I think Atlanta is going to be a prime contender for being the first defensive player drafted, or for drafting the first defensive player in the draft. Dallas Turner, edge rusher out of Bama, looks like to be the most likely move here. And then moving on to the Vikings. They make a move for quarterback. I think that the most likely trade scenario is them moving up to the Chargers at 5. There are a lot of mocks that have them going to trade up for 5 to grab J.J. McCarthy. And right now, McCarthy's sitting at plus 125 odds to be a Viking. So, I don't know. Let's line it up. I think that's going to happen. Moving on to the Broncos at 12. The Broncos are having an open competition at quarterback, trading former number 2 overall pick Zach Wilson. I think that Penix at 12 is going to be a really nice move. And, yeah. Moving on to my mock. Let's pull that up. So, here we are. This is the meat and potatoes of the show. Now that all of that Buzz recap is over, spent a lot of time putting together all of my different articles that I've read, all the different reports that I've read, and trying to put together the best looking mock draft, the most realistic mock draft. So let's break it down. Like I said, number 1, Caleb Williams. That's pretty much a no-brainer. That's a lock for me. Number 2, Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is a hit. I think this is the best move for Washington. We've already talked about that. Moving on to number 3, Drake May. I like Drake May a lot for New England. Kind of fits that quarterback need that they need. And yeah, moving down the line, some other headlines that I like here is, like I had already mentioned, J.J. McCarthy moving back to 11. Sorry about that. My computer is all frozen up. So we're just gonna freeball it. So the Minnesota Vikings are moving up to number 5 in my mock draft to grab J.J. McCarthy. This play style for J.J. McCarthy is exactly what the Vikings are gonna. They're kind of repeating back from the Kirk Cousins era, and yeah. Going on to number 6, I have Malik Neighbors. Now, like I said, a lot of mocks have them moving up and down, grabbing a quarterback, this and that. They have Daniel Jones on the roster. I think they're going to give him one more go at it, one more season to kind of put it all together and put an elite playmaker around him. Moving on to number 7, Joe Alt. He will be the first tackle drafted, and he is the best tackle by far in the draft. Titans kind of lock up their side of the offensive line and give their young starter Will Levis a place to compete. Moving on to number 8. So this is an interesting one because we had already talked about Atlanta taking a defensive player at number 8 overall, and that would be tying the record for the latest a defensive player has been drafted. I think Dallas Turner is the right move here. They have a need at edge, and he's clearly the best edge in the draft. Moving on to number 9, the Bears double up on offense and go Rome Odunze, wide receiver out of Washington, who some say is an even better wide receiver than Jamar Chase, up there with like Justin Jefferson type level of talent. Number 10, Brock Bowers makes the most sense. For the Jets, they have a need on offense, and while they have Aaron Rodgers with 1 year left, probably going to be his last season as a quarterback, I think that kind of solidifying their tight end position, which has kind of been a revolving wheel for the last few years. Brock Bowers kind of gives them that edge up at tight end, and you kind of saw it with the Bills last year in Dalton Kincaid, where a lot of times it was kind of unexpected or not expected of the tight end, and with at least within their first couple years to be really any sort of weapon or threat. They say that tight end is one of the positions that takes such a long time to transition to at the NFL level, but the Bills and Dalton Kincaid kind of broke that. So I think we could see that here at 10 for the Jets. Brock Bowers is one of those generational tight ends that I think would be a perfect match for them. Moving on to number 11, the Chargers finally make their pick at 11, drafting Alabama cornerback Terrion Arnold. They have needs all over the board. Wide receiver could be a need here, especially if they stay at 5. They could draft Joe Alt at 5. They could take Neighbors themselves at 5, but ultimately they have more holes than they really need to have for to draft a luxury position player like wide receiver. I think Terrion Arnold makes the most sense for them here at 11. Going on to number 12, Michael Penix. Like I had already said, there has been a lot of buzz about Michael Penix throughout the draft, throughout the offseason as a whole. Some mocks have him going all the way up to number 5. Some have him going all the way down into the second round. I think this reminds me last year of the Will Levis situation where there is really just such a crapshoot in where he could go. He has the talent and he has those immeasurables that you just can't teach. But the injury history is kind of what held him back. I mean, I think that with the open competition at quarterback that the Broncos have right now, they can, give the starter job to Zach Wilson, who they just traded for this week, to start, and then have Michael Penix waiting and ready in the wings. And it'd be a great move for them. Going on to 13, The Raiders select Quinion Mitchell, cornerback out of Toledo. He would be the first MAC player drafted into the NFL in the first round since Corey Davis in 2017. So that's a fun little tidbit. We all love our MACtion here in Western New York. Shout out UB. I think this is a perfect fit for them. It fits what they need at corner, fits their defensive scheme, and I could see quarterback going here too. If Penix isn't drafted at 12, I could certainly see Las Vegas taking Penix at 13. But ultimately, with quarterback off the table, with four already taken in this mock draft, cornerback is the best move, and he's clearly the best player available. Moving on to 14, I have I'm gonna pronounce this incorrectly. Olumayiwa Finashu. Apologies to Olumayiwa if you're listening to this. I'm just gonna call you by your last name in Fashanu. Offensive tackle out of Penn State. Saints have a need here. I'm not overthinking this one. This one's a no-brainer to me. Run through these next few ones. I have Laialatu Latu at number 15 to the Colts, edge rusher out of UCLA. Again, fits the need. I could see I could see the Colts drafting a corner here, but ultimately with Mitchell and Arnold already gone, edge made the more sense. Moving on to 16, Jared Verse, edge rusher from Florida State, going to Seattle. Seattle is in a weird spot too. They could definitely draft a quarterback this year, especially with Geno Smith on 1 year left of his contract. Ultimately, I think that this is going to be an edge rusher. They lost a couple key defensive players in this past offseason, and I believe that they are looking for new foundational cornerstones for their defensive side of the ball. Seattle's just in a weird spot as a whole. They're kind of at an aging-ish roster in terms of offense, with a strong young core at defense. So honestly, making the best move for them would be to continue to build on that defense. Let it play out one more year on offense, and then have to make the moves necessary to make it. I feel like we've seen in recent years, offensive talent takes a little bit less time to develop than defensive side. So if you can have a really strong defensive team, then offensive players have been kind of plug and play in recent years. I'm thinking about all the moves that we see, all the first round and first year players that are making an impact on offense. I feel like it's been even more so than defense in recent years. Moving on to number 17, Jacksonville Jaguars select Cooper DeJean. He's listed as a safety, but I believe he'll play at corner/return man in the NFL, at least to start. Out of Iowa. Cooper DeJean, I've seen, this is a pretty high spot for him. I've seen him kind of fringe first round, but Jacksonville has a need, and he's kind of one of those newer age positionless defensive players, and I think Jacksonville would be a perfect spot for him. Moving on to 18, offensive tackle Fuaga out of Oregon State, going to the Bengals. I feel like it's just like every single year, Bengals have a first-round talent. Yeah, first-round pick, let's grab offensive line. Every single year it plays out. It's the same. Again, I'm not going to overthink it. It makes too much sense. Every year it seems like they're kind of constantly rebuilding this offensive line, and one year you'll get it right. Moving on to number 19, the LA Rams, who had just lost Aaron Donald in the offseason to retirement. They come in, they get the top defensive tackle in the draft, and Byron Murphy the second. Just like that, LA, another perennial all-pro defensive tackle waiting in the wings. It's going to happen. No-brainer. Moving on to number 20, Troy Fontanu, offensive tackle out of Washington. This is a perfect spot for Mr. Dangerous himself, Russell Wilson. It seems like Pittsburgh is going to be kind of all in this year with some backups, or kind of backup plans to help them out if things go south. But ultimately, I think offensive tackle is the right move. There's a clear need here. Not much else to say about it. Moving on to number 21, the Miami Dolphins select J.C. Latham, offensive tackle out of Alabama. Now, Miami has lost a lot of players in this past offseason, especially along their offensive defensive lines. So I don't rule them taking defense here. If they do go defense, I could see them taking edge rusher or defensive tackle, especially with two injury-prone edge rushers in Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. We'll see how Jalen Phillips looks after his return from the ACL tear. But ultimately, J.C. Latham was the best player on the board for Miami here at 21, so that's what they'll do. Now here at number 22, we finally had some spice. Buffalo Bills trade up to number 22 to draft Brian Thomas Jr. This has been kind of written on the walls all offseason. You have like Brian Thomas's teammates all saying that he's going to be a Bill. A lot of executives think that the Bills are going after Brian Thomas. I think it's a good fit. The Bills obviously losing Stephon Diggs. There's a clear need at wide receiver, a wide open hole for that alpha receiver because honestly, Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir and Justin Shorter are not going to cut it. I think that the Bills really kind of telegraphed their move by trading away Stephon Diggs, and I would be shocked to see Buffalo go after anything but wide receiver in this draft, whether it mean trade all the way up into the teens to make sure they get their guy. If they see a run on receiver, I feel like they were kind of sitting on their hands a little bit last year, especially when Jackson Smith-Njigba fell all the way down to 20 to Seattle. I don't think they'll want to make that same mistake again. We know Brandon Beane to be kind of antsy when it comes to this pick, especially when it comes to picking in the late first. So ultimately, I think that 22 is a good spot. I have the Bills sending over a third-round pick to get up to this spot. And so Philadelphia can adjust their lines, fill some holes that they need to on the defensive talent, and then on the defensive side of the ball as well as the offensive line. Moving on to 23, I have Adonai Mitchell going to the Chargers. This is the second of first-round picks that I had Minnesota trading to get up to number 5. So the Chargers have a need at wide receiver with Keenan Allen being shipped off to the Bears. And Adonai Mitchell is one of those players that kind of impressed really well in the offseason, was more of a fringe first-rounder, almost a mid-second rounder. A lot of grades, a lot of mocks had him around there, but has really caught on some buzz going into the recent weeks. I think he adds that speed element that the Chargers need with Keenan Allen gone. But ultimately, I think this is a good fit here, and it gives Justin Herbert another weapon to throw to. Number 24, Marius Mims going to the Dallas Cowboys, the offensive tackle out of Georgia. Dallas is another team. They just lost multiple offensive players, and they lost a couple offensive linemen to their retirement, so this makes more than enough sense. Moving on to 25, I have Graham Barton, interior offensive lineman out of Duke, going to the Packers. Jordan Love impressed the first year. Green Bay is an up-and-coming team. I think it's going to be a competition between the Packers and the Lions for at least the next couple of years until Minnesota can kind of find their bearings, until Chicago can figure it out, if they ever figure it out. But just when we thought the Packers were down and out, they are back in it with Jordan Love. Jordan Love really impressed in his first year, and so what better way to kind of complement your new franchise quarterback than to give him a huge centerpiece. Literally huge centerpiece for his offense. Moving on to 26. Now, Tampa Bay is in a weird spot. I think they have multiple holes across their roster. They could go in a multitude of different positions and kind of just let the board fall to them. I have them going Chop Robinson, the edge rusher out of Penn State. Edge, I think, is a need for them, but I could totally see this being wide receiver as well. Moving on to number 27. This is another one where this could go a multitude of ways. So Johnny Newton, I have mocked defensive tackle out of Illinois. They have some need on the interior defensive line. I could see receiver here also. I could even see corner over here. But ultimately, second best defensive tackle off the board at 27 to the Cardinals. Number 28, this was the Bills' original pick that they gave up to the Eagles to go up to 22, so now the Eagles will be picking. Best corner available in Kool-Aid McKinstry, also probably coolest name in the first round. Chop Robinson comes close, but Kool-Aid McKinstry just sounds just a tad better. They have needs on the defensive backside of the ball. I could see them going in a multitude of ways, especially with Jason Kelce retiring. If Graham Barton doesn't go at 25, he is certainly would go to number 28 to the Eagles in this scenario. Moving on to number 29, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Nate Wiggins, corner out of Clemson. Losing C.J. Gardner-Johnson in free agency. This is the right move for them. They need to kind of build on that defense side of the ball. They were getting cooked, especially towards the end of last year. Number 30, I have Xavier Worthy going to Baltimore Ravens. The wide receiver out of Texas was a hit at the Combine. He broke the record for the fastest 40 time ever. And so that true element of speed is what Baltimore is lacking right now. Gives Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP, another weapon to throw to. Moving on to number 31, I have San Francisco selecting Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Not really much to talk about this one, especially once we get to this back end of the round. I think, these are all kind of dart throws, crap shoots, shots in the dark, whatever you want to call them. Tyler Guyton was the best guy available, and the Niners could use help on the offensive line. This is another situation where I could see them taking a wide receiver, but ultimately they go Guyton at 31. And lastly, another move that I think will be more than telegraphed on draft day, especially with Rashee Rice facing legal trouble. Kansas City Chiefs selecting wide receiver. In this case, I have them going wide receiver Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. I think that, the rich get richer in these situations, and the reigning Super Bowl champs add another weapon to their roster. So, there it is. My one and only mock draft in all its glory. Pick it apart, do what you want with it. There it all is. Obviously, these things never come up to what they look like in the mocks. Every single year, you go back and look at the mocks and you see the first round, and you're like, wow, how did I think of this? Obviously, I think there are going to be a lot more trades. It's just so hard to project the trades in a mock. I think there will be a lot more movement on draft day. I think last year broke a record for how much movement there actually was on draft day. So I'm super excited to see this. It's going to be a fun one. Sad I usually have a tradition every year to go to Brickyard. Won't be happening this year, unfortunately, with my wonderful girlfriend Molly in Spain. Hope she's enjoying her trip out there, but I'll have to be rapid texting her the entire night while she's trying to sleep, talking about the draft. So if you're listening, Molly, just get ready for a flood of messages in the morning. Keeping it short and sweet today. That is all I have for you guys. Just wanted to unveil the mock draft, kind of talk about some of the buzz, accumulate all news, and that's all we got for what will be the last episode inside of Emerge. After the draft, Big Yak will be back and better than ever. A lot more guests line up, a lot less me talking, a lot more guests talking. Originally, we had planned to have guests today, but a couple things fell through. We'll be bringing them back in the coming weeks. That's all I have for you guys today. Stay safe on draft night. Have fun watching, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.